Our first crossover movie, and I'll readily admit that I haven't actually read much of Detective Conan. Not really sure I can dedicate myself to another 1,000+ chapter series, but I don't know, maybe one day. Still, I've read enough of it to get at least a rough idea of everything. Anyway, for those who haven't read it, here's a brief rundown. The series started in 1994 by author Gosho Aoyama and goes by the name Case Closed in English. Aspiring detective Shinichi Kudo goes on a fairground date with his love interest Ran Mouri. He solves a case involving a decapitation on a roller coaster, but notices a pair of suspicious men. Following them, he gets dosed with a special poison and is one of the lucky ones that de-ages about 10 years because of it. Meeting with family friend Professor Agasa, he helps build a disguise under the new identity Conan Edogawa, named from famous detective authors. He teams up with Ran, who's oblivious to his true identity, and her father Kogoro to solve a number of cases and hopefully find the people who poisoned him as well as who they work for. Minami Takayama, Conan's voice actress, has actually made an appearance in Lupin III before as Dead or Alive's Oleander. Oddly enough, Ran's actress Wakana Yamazaki voices Ayane in a different Dead or Alive. Sonoko, Ran's friend who appears in a few scenes, also shares a voice actress with Burns Antetsukin's Kikyo too. We have Yui Horie this year as the leading lady Mira Giulietta Vesperland. Hajime Kamagaki serves as director, with Atsushi Maekawa coming on as writer. For our ending theme, we get the 1989 version of the Lupin III theme, which just so happens to mark the 20th anniversary of it being first composed. The royal family of the nation of Vespania are out on a hunting trip. The queen, Sakura, heads out to a cherry tree while her son Gilles and brother Gerard hunt. A gunshot rings out as she talks with the fox. Gilles emerges and realises his mother's been shot. Another shot rings out as Gerard calls in the royal guard, and Gilles' body is found, evidence suggesting he shot himself in despair. News of this reaches Japan and in particular the Mouri household. Not to mention that Lupin's also on a plane to Vespania. A week later, Gerard discusses matters with his aide Count Keith regarding funeral arrangements as well as the issue of the surviving daughter Mira. He wants to make sure she's protected from her own despair over the incident as well as the rising number of anti-royalists. Mira's more just angry that she's now set to rule, as everything had been set up for her brother up to that point. Keith has a bodyguard hired for a goodwill trip to Japan, who just so happens to be Jigen, but she's not interested in him. Despite her complaints, Mira heads to Japan, while Jigen stays in Vespania. His main interest, besides helping bring the guard's marksmanship up to speed, is the queen crown set to be used in the coronation. He's warned about getting too close as there's the usual security stuff, cameras, lasers, as well as heat and weight sensors, not to mention they don't have the password to disable it at that location. Jigen relays this to Lupin, reminding that this heightened security is due to the crown being one of the few times he failed to steal something. Lupin has a plan this time around, as his attention turns to a special stone. Conan and his friends are attending the Vespania party at the Sakurasaku Hotel. Ran's running late, but everyone grows surprised when Mira comes out, given the resemblance to her. Conan passes by a sommelier as Keith provides a speech. As Mira raises a glass for a toast, Conan tells them to ask the sommelier to sample it before she takes a drink. The sommelier runs, but Kogoro is on hand to stop him. Conan, alongside Kogoro as well as Detective Megure, meets with Keith, who thanks him for figuring things out. The sommelier was under the impression he was only spiking a drink with a laxative rather than a poison, but as a result, Mira's left unable to drink even from water prepped by her maids. Conan mentions he smelled tobacco on the sommelier, something a high-class hotel wouldn't allow, much less on a royal visit. A fire alarm goes off, and security rushes to Mira's room only to find it empty. A certain woman who was seen at the party keeps watch from the shadows before suiting up and driving out. As Keith finds a lighter used to set the alarm off, Rand's close to the hotel by now, worried she's missed the party. She ends up running into Mira, with the resemblance not being lost on either of them. Of course, physical resemblance is the extent, as Mira's rebellious side includes smoking and drinking, while Rand's is more on mistaking bodyguards for kidnappers. As Conan sets out to find Mira, she decides Rand would be the perfect candidate for a prince and pauper situation. After switching clothes, she races off, not intending to return. Conan runs into her, but she messes up her disguise by remembering him from the poisoned wine glass incident. She ditches Conan and ends up encountering Fujiko, who says to go with her if she wants to live. Or escape Conan at the least. Rand heads to the hotel, getting caught up in a fantasy between her and Shinichi when she sees her reflection. As Fujiko rides with Mira, they listen to police reports, and she reveals Mira was being tracked by her choker. A car pursues the pair, but Fujiko dismisses them as amateurs. Conan, however, is much less of an amateur. Their chase leads to a game of chicken on a bridge railing. Conan loses, given he only has a skateboard. Back at the hotel, Rand and her father are discussing what happened with Mira. Keith suggests running with the princess switch, but Megaray's against it as Rand's a private citizen. Rand decides to go with it, as it likely won't be too long. Kogoro and Megaray leave, putting out a search warrant for Rand, given as far as anyone else knows, Mira's not missing now. Meanwhile, Lupin heads to a mine that contains the stone he's after. As he prepares to search a deposit using the ever-scientific method of dowsing, he explains it has the ability to dampen radar signals, potentially giving Vespania a stronger military, but also allowing him to get close to the crown. Mira enjoys the sights of Tokyo under Fujiko's supervision. As they eat at a sushi restaurant, Fujiko reminds Mira she's technically a hostage right now, even if Mira senses Fujiko's not all bad. Lupin finds what he needs and heads outside. Unfortunately, the military has learned of his location and blows up his getaway vehicles. Turns out Jigen was behind that one, having spent time training them for this situation. Mira's still missing, so Keith tells Rand that he'll have her appear at a speech the next morning to announce everything. Rand's nervous on the day, but soon calms down with Keith's words and a cup of tea. Likely bitter tea, as she passes out and gets ferried onto the plane to Vespania. Conan manages to catch up and boards the plane as it takes off. Kogoro can only watch, but Megaray introduces him to Zenigata. He's gotten wind of Lupin's presence in Vespania and uses his jurisdiction to take Kogoro on as an assistant. Rand wakes up and Keith's surprised at how casual she's acting despite being effectively kidnapped. He then reveals they found Conan in the gears. He's safe, but the low temperatures have left him bedridden for the moment. Meanwhile, Fujiko and Mira decide to crash at Lupin's hideout, having made it to Vespania themselves. Lupin's not invited, of course. Keith calls a meeting of people he can trust, which includes Conan, Rand and Jigen. He suspects Gerard killed Gilles and Sakura, but needs the evidence to prove it. Jigen agrees to working with Conan to find evidence, even if he isn't a fan of the cover story that they're father and son. As they leave to investigate, Rand learns a lot of Mira's roughness is due to her not being allowed to publicly show any weakness. Meanwhile, Lupin's stuck playing escort for Fujiko and Mira. Jigen and Conan search around for possible sniper points. Jigen grows suspicious when Conan notes that Jigen's hand shape suggests he's good with a revolver. He shrugs it off and gives Conan some money for a drink while he takes some downtime in a bar. By coincidence, Lupin's also trying to get a drink, but the vending machine ate his money. Conan encounters him performing some maintenance on the machine and helping himself to the drinks and money. Conan lectures Lupin on stealing as he drops his coin in the pile and takes a drink. Lupin shrugs him off before angrily running back and doing the same. Zenigata and Kogoro meet with Gerard. Kogoro splits off and finds Ran, and they bring each other up to speed. Kogoro retorts that Keith himself is also suspicious, given he kidnapped Ran and has his own possible agenda against the royal family. Mira's maids shut this down, and Keith himself offers a reasonable paycheck to gain his trust. Lupin and Fujiko take Mira to the cherry tree, allowing her to privately grieve for her mother and brother. Jigen and Conan's investigation brought them there, but they allow her time before they start. Meanwhile, Kogoro searches the royal armoury, and learns about how Jill's gun has matching rifling marks to the bullet that hit Sakura, pointing him as the killer. Zenigata, on the other hand, is more interested in the Queen Crown security for the moment. Investigating the cherry tree, Conan and Jigen discover a burned branch. Mira informs them of how the scene was discovered, with Jill's rifle shooting Sakura as he was hunting the fox and Jill taking Gerard's pistol. They thank her for the info and offer her a ride back, but she declines as that nice woman Minako Fuji is doing so. She doesn't overhear her talking with Lupin about the dampening device he's made using the stone. Turns out that Minako was also paid off by Keith to give Mira that night of freedom in the first place. Jigen returns to the palace and finds Lupin enjoying a meal as reward for keeping Mira safe. They plan out the crown heist while Conan and Kogoro talk about the royal deaths. Zenigata enters, so Lupin does a disappearing act, under the table. Conan meets with Mira and investigates the Queen's chamber as Mira makes mention of the special law. He discovers some remains of bullets underneath her desk as well as some powder. Lupin heads to the Crown's vault, but finds the guards already unconscious. Looking inside the vault, he discovers a message from Fujiko, indicating she's already taken it by stealing the dampener. The message self-destructs and sets off the sensors, trapping Lupin inside. Fujiko herself doesn't get too far with the Crown either, however, thanks to Zenigata's intervention. Lupin escapes with help from Goemon cutting through. Kind of forgot about him up to now. Zenigata spots their jet leaving, and deduces that Lupin only escaped to the vault rather than leaving with the others. That evening, everyone's called out to a gazebo. Conan fires off a tranquilizer at Kogoro, but he dodges and Zenigata's hit. Conan improvises and switches his voice modulator to match Zenigata, but then he recovers, seeing how Lupin's hit him with so many tranquilizers he's developed a resistance to them. Kogoro, or rather Lupin, steps in to help, with Conan switching his voice modulator back to Kogoro to give the rundown. Gerard gives himself away when mentioning Ran's whole body double bit, as he wasn't supposed to be aware of it. Mira steps up and mentions it was odd the pistol was in Jill's right hand, as despite being coached, he was left-handed. His rifle, despite otherwise being identical to any other, was also supposed to be meant for use with the left hand, but the rifling marks matched those of a right-handed rifle. Lupin breaks character as he realises what happened, with Conan interjecting that Gerard switched out the rifles before anyone found them, as his was right-handed and the weapon locker was only accessible by the royal family, not to mention the rifling marks. Lupin fires the rifle at Gerard, revealing Sakura removed the live parts of Jill's bullets, which is what Conan found under her dresser. While she was a marksman herself, she was trying to discourage her son from pursuing it, and Gerard was also known as a master marksman. Gerard goes mask off, revealing he planned to kill everyone there. Too bad for him, Jigen and Goemon took out his sniper team. He has a backup plan, revealing he rigged the gazebo. He offers Keith a place with him if he sells out Mira, but Keith stands firm. Zenigata cuffs Lupin, having picked up on him accidentally calling him Totsan during Conan's whole explanation. It's also revealed that Sakura's murder was motivated by her not wanting to mine for the ore as it had ruined the environment. Gerard activates the bomb, but Fujiko, disguised as a maid, cancels it out with the dampener. In the ensuing fight, Gerard's taken out and Mira disowns him. Unfortunately, the dampener runs out of power, but everyone escapes with relatively minor injuries. Lupin talks with Mira at the cherry tree, revealing he met Sakura the first time he tried to steal the crown. She wanted to leave with him, but he convinced her to stay by telling her he'd be back to steal the crown when she became a great leader. He places the crown on Mira, telling her the same thing. Conan reveals he knew Sakura loved the cherry tree, so the burned branch was decisive evidence that Jill wouldn't have killed her. He also realises he doesn't even know who Lupin is, which leads him to reveal his name. As everyone prepares to leave, Conan's escorted out of Vespania by the gang, which serves him well as he didn't enter legally, not to mention Conan Edogawa doesn't actually exist. He exits with Fujiko, who's interested in the secret to his youth. It's kind of odd that despite Lupin's theme opening and closing the movie, if anything it's Conan's cast that takes centre stage for most of it. You have Lupin doing some plotting stuff, but not really getting involved in anything relating to the main focus till much later. The two sides don't really come to blows much either, as Lupin and Conan only interact with each other at the vending machine and in the final wrap-up. Goemon's also just there to remind you he's part of the gang too, mostly, which is kind of unfortunate. The Detective Conan cast is simple enough to pick up on and get invested in at least. Most of them are introduced quite early on in their series proper anyway. A little bit obvious that Gerard was the killer, but I suppose they were going for a how rather than a who. Plus it's not like Keith wasn't suspicious too, which had a good payoff when he stood with Mira in the end. Despite the lack of interaction between him and Lupin, Conan annoying Jiggin by playing up the fake father-son thing was amusing at least. Plus Fujiko's whole bit with Mira was nice enough with some good payoff, allowing her to have a bit of freedom. The references to Lupin were a good touch too, such as the eye catch, along with the nod to Zenigata's acquired resistance to tranquilizers, and Lupin being shown wearing green in the flashback with Sakura. While the screen time is definitely skewed towards Detective Conan and there's not really much of a versus as such, neither side's made to look better or worse than the other, and it's an entertaining enough watch. Probably more so for fans of Detective Conan, or even both series. Next time, another old foe makes a return as the original voice cast come together for a last job. Until then.